Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. And just really quick, I've been doing a lot of stuff with the Israeli conflict in the Middle East, and I haven't had a chance to talk too much about this month's book giveaway. It's The Burning Book with Jason Olson and James Goldberg, a Jewish Mormon memoir. Of course, Jason has been coming on my program a lot because he's a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy and is also a Zionist, one of the foremost Zionist scholars in the world, and has been very helpful covering this Middle East situation, which, for whatever reason, Mormon Book Reviews has got itself involved in. But I think God wants me to do it, and so I'm going to do it. Now, I have some really exciting people to have here on the program. Now, all of us have one thing in common. It just dawned on me. All of us have been on Mormon Stories. I remember, so that's something that we all have in common. And Mark, have you ever been on Gospel Tangents?
No.
Rick Bennett? Oh,
no, I'm friends with Rick.
I was going to say that we were all on that too. So real quick, I actually just happen to have these books here. Mark is the author of the Glasslooker series, which unfortunately this year you weren't able to come up with volume 3, but apparently you'll be able to do that next year. Is that correct, sir?
Yeah, I'm trying to just stay 200 years ahead. That's the goal. So I had the last book gave me a little buffer. So
yeah, okay, understood. And of course, we have the man, the myth, the legend, one of the greatest scholars of Mormonism, and really the go-to guy for everything Joseph Smith. Dan Vogel, welcome to the program.
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, this was last minute, and I just literally asked you
today
this morning. Yes. And of course, he's the author of the fantastic book, Charisma Under Pressure, Joseph Smith, American Prophet, which covers the period from 1831 to 1839. But we're going to be talking about a period a little before that. This is really an interesting undertold story in history. Now, Casey on Monday contacted me, and he's in Korea. And he contacted me and I had actually asked him, because I've been kept up to date on this situation, but there's a particular piece of property in New York, not far from where Joseph grew up, that may have played a pivotal role in Mormon history. It's certainly the source of a lot of local folklore and legend, but it is a place that can be directly attached to Joseph Smith and Joseph Smith Sr., and perhaps others. And it's a fantastic, interesting story. And it's about a piece of land. It's actually a cave. And it's called the Mormon Cave in some instances, also called Miner's Cave. But it's also called the Mormon Cave. And, that's something that piqued the interest of a younger Dan Vogel back in the day. And I'm going to go to you first, because I want you to give the historical context. Now, this is why this is so important, folks. This is a very important piece of Mormon history that is on private property that has just recently been listed. And the purpose of this episode is to get the word out to what we would love to see is a prospective buyer to jump on this opportunity to preserve a very important historic site. And later we're going to be talking to Erin, welcome Erin Elwood, you're the lovely wife of Mark. Welcome to the show, by the way.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So she's going to talk about the importance of what we can do to make this a historic landmark in New York, because basically what could happen, somebody could buy that property and they could bulldoze this cave. And we don't want to see that happen, because it's an important historic site undertold. And so, Casey, I want to thank you for reaching out to me and helping put this together.
Happy to do it.
So now I want to talk to Dan Vogel a little bit. I want you to give a little context here. When did you first hear about this Mormon cave? And why do you think it's important that it be preserved? And maybe just talk about some of the work that you've done. You wrote a article in Dialogue in the mid-90s about it. Maybe just talk about your history with the Mormon cave.
Well, I was working on the 5-volume document series on early Mormon documents, dealing with Joseph Smith's life from birth to 1831. And I was editing documents like, Lorenzo Saunders and Benjamin Saunders, who lived on this property during Joseph Smith's lifetime. They rented it, actually, from another early Mormon figure called Abner Cole. He was actually the owner of this property. And I was doing a lot of research on property records and trying to locate the property that this cave that Lorenzo Saunders mentioned, the cave, and told the story of the cave and what all the happenings on that Miner, what's called Miner Hill. Miner Hill is situated literally over the hill from the Smith's farm, and it's the kind of the next hill over from the Smith farm. And the first document to talk about the earliest part of it was Abner Cole's Palmyra Reflector, talked about Walters the magician and how the mantle of Walters the magician fell upon young Joseph. And a lot of people have written Abner Cole off, saying that he was a little, wild with his facts and things, and where he maybe made up this stuff. But as it turns out, Abner Cole owned the property and he knew what he was talking about. He owned that hill, and the Saunders family were renters there during the time that this cave was dug. And it goes back to Alvin Smith, Joe Smith's older brother, before he died in 1823. He and Willard Chase had hired Walters the magician, according to Lorenzo Saunders, and they were digging on that hill looking for a treasure. And then as Abner Cole said, the mantle fell upon young Joseph, and he looked in his stone, according to Lorenzo Saunders, and saw a golden throne with an Indian chief sitting on it. And the golden throne was in the hill, and the golden throne was just another artifact that money diggers would be interested in. It was buried there, just like the golden plates, the golden throne, other Indian treasures that they were looking for, or pirate treasures. Well, this was just a golden throne, and Joseph Smith Sr. evidently totally believed that there was a throne in there, and Joseph Smith Sr. was the main digger of this tunnel that one source says it was about 40 feet, which might be an exaggeration, but it was quite a tunnel. And this all occurred before 1825, because I dated it by Lorenzo Saunders mentioned that his father had told him to tear down the door, because they had put up a door on the cave, tear down the door and cave in the entrance, and they wanted to stop the money digging going on there. And Enoch Saunders, which is Lorenzo's father, died on the 10th of October, 1825. So this cave had to have been dug before that date. Anyway, while I was doing all this research for my footnoting and my documents, various documents and things, it occurred to me that I should gather all of the locations of Joseph Smith's treasure quests and write an article based on a lot of these footnotes and information I had gathered. And I wrote that in the Dialogue in the 1990s, I think it was. So it started from there, and I even visited all these areas that I had documented where Joseph Smith may have dug, and some of them were more certain than others. Some of them are more legendary. I went down to Harmony, Pennsylvania, and saw the hill where Joseph Smith dug on that hill with Josiah Stoll, and things like that. So I actually found the hill because of the property records and maps, early maps. And I actually found the impression, the indentation in the hill where it had caved in, the entrance had caved in. I also learned that one of the subsequent owners of the land in 1970s, I hear, Andrew Comer, he bulldozed the entrance, and he put up a little bars at the entrance of the cave, and there was even a picture in the Palmyra newspaper with him standing in the entrance and the light at the end of the tunnel shining behind him. And I published the photograph of that. So that's kind of the beginning of it. And Casey will talk about how he dug it up, which totally surprised me. And I it was like, wow, I was so curious about whether is there really a cave in there or not. And Casey confirmed that there was. And
Yeah.
So I was so happy when I learned that was verified, and it's a very important. Who can deny the cave now? It is a significant event in the Smith's life, and pre-Book of Mormon period, when Joseph Smith was money digging. It wasn't just anti-Mormon slander or anything. It's actual places where he dug, and this was a very important event in my mind, digging this tunnel up. Casey and his partner, I forget his name.
Yeah, Casey.
Greg,
what was your Greg?
Craig.
Greg was his name. Okay,
Greg.
so Casey, what's so interesting, and before I want you to kind of chime in now here, Casey, too, is that we know that Hill Cumorah is what's called a drum line, which at the time I think a lot of people thought maybe it was a mound, and but it's actually a drum line that was created during one of the last ice ages, where the rocks kind of piled up. It just looked that up, a drum line. But the Miner's Cave, or the Mormon Cave, is Miner's Hill. Do we know the geological history of that? Is that a man-made mound? Is that just a natural feature? What do we know about it?
So geologically, it's similar to Cumorah. In fact, all of the hills in the area are kind of similar. There was a big glacier that just kind of scraped across it, and in other geologic settings, you would find natural caves. Usually, those are from limestone. A limestone bedrock, and what happens is that when the water flows through it, because there's some porosity, is that it eats away at the rock, and then the rock particles then kind of flow downstream, leaving cavities and rocks. And gaps that then can turn into caves. That is not the geology that we find here. This is basically, it's packed clay, all just compressed and packed. So there's no, and it's not even stone. This is a mineral composition that's very different from that. So we would never expect to find any natural caves the way we would find in other settings here. So the fact that we found an actual cave, an actual opening, a cavity there, is almost certainly an indication of human activity. This is an artificial cave.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so and check out, of course, you were on Gospel Tangents a couple of years ago, in which you and your friend were both, it was quite a remarkable story, actually. And it was really remarkable. And the other thing too, is what we want to do is now, we don't want to just go in and dig holes. We actually want to do like a legitimate archaeological dig here as well, to see if we can find anything, which would be really fascinating. So that's another thing that we want to do with this whole project, folks, is really, again, this is the thing. This could be literally bulldozed down a month from now, once they close the sale. But this important history, this important thing in Mormon history that is directly attached to Joseph Smith, to Joseph Smith Sr., to Alvin, to all these important names, could very well be just leveled off at some point. And we want to make sure that this is that the person who buys this lands understands the history, appreciates it, and that we can maybe make this a historic landmark, which of course Erin's going to talk about briefly. But maybe, Casey, talk a little about the urgency of why we need to do something, and do something now.
Well, yeah, the first, when it comes to the listing, so this was at the moment of this taping, it was listed about two and a half days ago, and the way it works is there's a 7-day period in which people are able to make their offers, and during that time there's no decision made, and then at the end of that period, if there are attractive offers, then they can make a decision. So the urgency is, from the time that this goes live to there will be about a 3 or 4 day window. I guess if you're watching this the day that's released, we're talking maybe next week, Tuesday is when this period is going to close. And if the owners get an attractive offer just from a local home buyer, they may accept that offer and take it off the market.
So why don't you put the
so
listing on
yeah.
the screen? Let's do that. So we got the
Sure.
listing here,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and then also, folks, what we're going to do is Mark is going to share some breathtaking video of this property as well. So we're going to give you some more detailed information. So stay tuned for all the facts, what's going on, and the importance of us. If there's a faithful Latter-day Saint, or maybe somebody who's just interested in upstate New York history, folklore, any number of people, I think it's really important that this property be put in the right hands. All right, tell us a little bit about this, Casey.
Yeah, so here's the actual listing itself, and we can put a link in the description and make sure that anybody has access to this. So of course it's an actual residence, right? There's an actual home built. The home itself, the current home was built in 1989. Let's see, there was some details on the lot acreage here is 10.5 acres. And if you look at some of the aerial photos, you can see cleared area where there's a home and there's a barn, but then the hill and there's a little trail that goes up. The property actually covers about, it goes pretty deep into the hill. It doesn't cover the entire hill, but it does cover where the cave site is. And so in terms of, here's the realtor has her contact information here. I did recently speak to the property owner. He said they've already had several walkthroughs of the home itself. But they do virtual walkthroughs too. So even if you're not on site, you can contact the realtor and you'll get a tour, walking through the house or the property with a video call. And yeah, so we can make this, we are publicizing this listing right here, because this is really the gateway into engaging with this real estate.
Yeah. So, and actually, also too, Casey, I want you to give some, Dan's given us some context. I also think you want to share some another screen share as well here regarding the kind of like the history that we can document that shows that there is a direct connection here, and also some new information that hasn't really been publicly discussed before about a description of how this was described by Martin Harris as well. And also the understanding of how the locals perceived the site as well. Because remember, the story of Mormonism doesn't just go along where they migrate to, it also stays in the places that's been at as well. And so it's really important to also document the stories that happen for the people that stayed. There's, that never didn't go to Kirtland, didn't go to Missouri and Nauvoo, and then ultimately many of them out to Salt Lake. So maybe speak to that new document that you're going to describe for the first time, and maybe screen.
Yeah. Let me give a little context on that first.
Do.
I do have a few
Yes.
Slides here I can share. Everybody can see that.
Looks great.
Okay. So first, here's an actual photo of the cave. This is recently after it was dug out. We'll see some more recent photos, but you see the dirt along the side. Nature doesn't like vertical lines, and the dirt kind of piles up in front. So the cave isn't accessible the way it is shown in this picture, although it could still be restored. But this is what we're looking at. This is the actual cave as it appears in the hill. And so here's the listing itself. Let me show some maps here that kind of show where it's situated. So the map on the left, I know the text is kind of small, but the Palmyra town is on the top, and then the Hill Cumorah Visitor Center is shown there on the lower half, and the Sacred Grove here is on the left side. It's basically halfway to the Hill Cumorah Visitor Center from Palmyra, on where this red point is. And if we zoom in a little bit, where it is in relation to the Smith Farm, so Miner Road is this road that goes east to west on the right side there, and the property is there where that red marker is. And here you see the Palmyra Temple, the stake center that is nearby, and the Sacred Grove and the Smith Farm Museum and Visitor Center are there. So this is really in the epicenter of the the Palmyra historic sites. So location, right? This is prime real estate for anyone for who wants to have a place that's nearby these points of interest. I mean, I know personally there a lot of people that travel to go see the sites or whatever. They often have to get hotels in Rochester or for Airbnbs kind of further off, just because there isn't a lot of developed structures and residences and hotels. I think there is one hotel up the street there, but it's always booked solid and it's really expensive. Anyway, so this is an opportunity, again, location being really important. This is very valuable real estate for those interested in these points of interest. Okay, so there's a lot of background information that I won't get into right now, but I will refer you and give a shout out to Rick Bennett and Gospel Tangents, because a lot of the background of how I got involved with this, how Greg and I dug up the cave, and what we learned about it, and how we engaged with the material that Dan had put together. That's all in this episode, so I'll refer you there. And just, but the short of it is largely what Dan Vogel just mentioned there, that you've got an early dig involving Lumen Walters most likely, and Alvin and Joseph Smith Sr., and then a lot of folklore and a lot of kind of secondhand newspaper accounts of Joseph Smith then using this cave in a variety of ways later. So from the beginning of the Gold Bible stories, there was always a component of this cave lore. In fact, so most recently, or actually just a few weeks ago, Richard Bushman published the Joseph Smith's Gold Plates: A Cultural History. And Steve, I think you just had him on recently to discuss this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's got a whole section in that called Cave Lore, and he kind of outlines some of this. So again, this is to show that this isn't that out there. This is in a book here published in 2023 by Richard Bushman. We've got mention of these cave stories, and he quotes Pomeroy Tucker, who published a book in 1867 where he mentions where he retells the story that he heard from who knows where, that the work of translation was done in an artificial cave. Now we know that the translation actually wasn't even done, or most of it wasn't done in all that was done in Pennsylvania. So it's kind of unclear. And maybe Dan, you have a comment on like where the idea that the translation happened in the cave came from.
Who knows the ways of folklore, how they happen. If it ever did happen like that, it would have happened before Joseph Smith left the Palmyra area to go to Harmony, Pennsylvania. And he left the Palmyra area in December of 1827.
Okay.
So if he did any kind of thing with the cave, which I seriously doubt, because the cave was caved in by Lorenzo Saunders' family before Enoch died in 1825. So the access to the cave after that is questionable.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but so notwithstanding, we have a lot of these sources that seem to, the stories, regardless of their factuality, seem to be about translation or revelations happening in this cave. So this cave seems to be tied to Joseph Smith, but here he identifies that it's now owned by Amos Miner. So quick who's who on here. So Amos Miner was a farmer. He got the property after the Saunders did. And here's an 1860 census, and you can see who's living with him. He's got his son and his grandson and some other and granddaughters as well. But the characters here that are mentioned are Amos Miner, Chauncey Miner, and Wallace Miner. And Wallace Miner is going to be important, so I want to bring that up. So Wallace Miner is Amos Miner's grandson. Amos Miner was here on the property in the 1800s, and then Wallace, well, he was living in this as a young boy as well, and then continued to live in the area going forward. So keep that in mind, because I'm going to do a quick detour about Martin Harris, and then you'll see how these will converge. So Martin Harris, after going to Kirtland, he would still return to Palmyra frequently. He still had property there. He still had family there. And so there's a lot of indications of him coming back to conduct business. Sometimes it seems like months at a time. From a fairly recent biography by Susan Easton Black and Larry C. Porter, here's just a sampling, like in 1835. So this is, 5 years after kind of moving to Ohio. We have an account of him back in Palmyra, meeting Thomas B. Marsh, David W. Patton, and Jonathan H. Hale, and he's giving tours of Cumorah. He brings them up to Cumorah. They go up there, they pray, and then the next year he's back in Palmyra. He's visiting his ailing wife, Lucy Harris, of prominent due to 116 pages incident. And anyway, she ended up passing away. But anyway, Martin Harris was back in Palmyra frequently. Very well documented in the 1830s, but it appears that even in the 1850s, he's making trips back to Palmyra. And this is where Wallace Miner shows up. So it's 1856. So this is about 20 years, 25 years after the organization of the church. And Wallace here is about 13 years old. And he says, he remembers, the source is from 1832, but he's recalling back when he was a youth, that Martin stayed at his home on Miner Hill, on the property we're talking about. And he said that he and Martin would go up to the hills, and Martin regarded it fully as sacred as the Mormon Hill diggings. And in a more recently discovered source, we have more information that Wallace relayed. He says, I was with him several times on the hill near the cave, as he was at our home for a short time. I listened to what he said about the early days of Mormonism and Joseph Smith, the great prophet, as he always called him. As he stood there with uncovered head and talked, I can remember how earnest he seemed to be. He said, my boy, this hill is holy ground. God has been here, right here where we stand. Just think of it. This hill is like unto Mount Zion of old. And he spoke of Cumorah, that holy hill where the records given to the great prophet Joseph were kept and guarded for ages for the benefit of those who were guided by them. He also spoke with such feeling of the home of the great prophet, and he said, many, many were the times he had been with the prophet on this hill. So this is kind of an outlier as far as the sources go, but
and just to be clear, we're not talking about Hill Cumorah. We're talking about the Miners Hill, right?
Right, exactly. I think he says he was at our home. He was at our home, and then he went up to the diggings. Yes, we're very clearly, and then he contrasts it. He's like, this is just as sacred as Hill Cumorah.
Yeah,
so Martin Harris held these two things in high esteem here, according to Wallace Miner. Now later, so this is when Wallace was just a kid. Decades later, the church in Salt Lake started becoming more interested in reclaiming some of the sites and from the early church history, and that George Albert Smith was kind of sent out to go scout out and make contacts and figure out what's where, what do we know about things. And as part of that, George Albert Smith actually makes contact with Wallace Miner. So here we have Wallace Miner's kind of spanning two edges. At one side, he's talked directly with Martin Harris, and on the other side, he's talked directly with George Albert Smith. So he and George Albert Smith start corresponding, and Wallace says, it's strange that your people have lost one of the most beautiful points of your early church history. The meeting of Joseph Smith and God in the cave on that holy hill is one of the great events in the history of the world. I'm willing to give you the facts to your people, and I know that they are true. And here's the actual letter. I can post a link to this later as well. George Albert Smith responded, and he says, when I visited your place, I was gathering information about the neighborhood as it had been passed down through the years. I appreciate the information you provided as it offered another perspective. Some of the information I gained in Palmyra is new to me, and some of it is easily connected with what we already had. So here we have an acknowledgement of like, hey, this is interesting, but this we don't really know what to do with this. And subsequently, it's largely been lost. Now, this doesn't really corroborate with anything with it, many of the other accounts and sources. So it's really hard to make sense of. It seems like Wallace Miner here is very convinced that this information is accurate, but it having been many decades and Martin Harris being the source, there's, who knows really what happened. But this is part of the historical record, and the stories about the cave involve Joseph Smith being involved with the cave, and perhaps, I mean, when I see the statement of, the meeting of God and Joseph Smith in the cave on that holy hill, I wonder if this is maybe conflating an early First Vision account. There's also an idea about the Sacred Grove itself. We don't really know where it was, other than, I mean, there's where it is right now, but those trees are less than 100 years old, and they were always clearing land and stuff. So the Sacred Grove may have gotten chopped down, really, but it's more likely that the hillsides were not cleared. So, if you look at the sources of this First Vision, it mentions that it was, the woods or a grove near my father's home. And, this hill actually could qualify as that. And we do have an account, such as it is, mentioning a theophany occurring on the hill. So I'll leave that with you. I'm not saying this is the site of the First Vision, but I'm saying there's a non-zero chance that it is. Anyway, so Wallace Miner eventually visits Salt Lake City. So he was very well connected into the church, the leadership. He was given a tour by George Albert Smith. So even though his statements are kind of out there, he wasn't completely on the fringes. So just to wrap up the information I wanted to cover. So according to the statements from the reporters, neighbors, and locals, and again, these are all convoluted and mutually exclusive in many cases. The digging was probably done by Alvin Smith, Joseph Smith, maybe directed by Leuven Walters in the early 1820s. As far as how it was used, the various sources that are all over the map, but maybe it was a hideout, maybe it was a site for obtaining revelation, maybe it was a place for translation, although that's almost entirely, we can rule that out. But maybe the writing, it's a site for church meetings. I've thought maybe, hey, the 8 witness experience, it just says that it was in Palmyra, somewhere in the woods. Also, there's some statements that the sealed portion is still there. David Whitmer seemed to think that. Anyway, who knows really, but this is the material that's out there. And then for the most recent stuff from Wallace Miner, Martin Harris stayed there almost for sure. Perhaps the cave was the site of a theophany. Was this another First Vision account? Was this a separate vision? Was this a conflation with something else? Is this a Sacred Grove counterpart? Is this the Sacred Grove? Again, who knows? But Martin Harris thought of it as holy as the Hill Cumorah. And George Albert Smith later visited it as well. So this is absolutely a hot spot of Mormon history, even if we can't really nail down what happened here. So that kind of covers what I wanted to
sure. No, that's great.
To go
Casey.
over as
Thank
far
you.
as just kind of the informational dump and like why this is significant. There's a lot of question marks, but there's obviously something of some magnitude here that's going on.
No, it's very fascinating, and it's also important to hear those voices that like them, that these stories develop. And you just wonder, we don't really know when the First Vision really happened as well. So this is the other thing, is that that these dates could actually correspond with maybe a later dating of the First Vision as well. So we could look at that as a possibility too. And Mark, and Erin, I'm really glad you guys came on this, because first, of course, Mark, you're very much attached to the folklore, attached to young Joseph Smith during this time period. And maybe just talk a little bit about that. And then I'd like for you to share that aerial footage. And then, Erin, I think it's really important. I think actually you're going to really kind of tell us the importance of why we would want to, and what it would take to make this a historic site so that we can preserve this very important piece of Mormon history.
All right. Well, Casey's going to be a tough act to follow because I don't have slides prepared or anything. But I mean, I just love this area, and it is completely rich in folklore. If you just walked a little north up the road, you'd find the location of the well where the brownstone was found. And if you went to the west, one hill, you'd end up where there was the legend of the sheep sacrifice. And then, there's various other hills, they're all, again, those drumlins running north-south, that have caves, or there's virtually almost everyone has some kind of story attached to it. So it's really fun to just kind of walk around there and visit with the locals. They're still telling stories today about, you know, Joseph Smith, and they get pretty wild. Like I know before maybe we started recording, we were talking about the walking on water stories, you know, and of Joseph attempting to walk on water. And that's, you know, there's so many stories that you can't always track down exactly how they start. But I think what's really great about this site is we have a physical spot where we can see, you know, where these stories came from. And that's not, you know, I don't know if it was very clear, but Casey has just literally like scratched the surface here and uncovered it. But I think like you basically uncovered it, right, Casey? You didn't actually like dig deep down into it or anything, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I should have mentioned that when I had the picture up. We did clear the dirt in the cave, and we eventually reached some boards, so some wooden boards, and we didn't get any lower than that. We didn't, you know, we weren't able to lift them up. They may have just been placed there in the 70s, just as you know, a boardwalk or something. But who knows? There may be something under there.
Yeah, if you flip them over, there's probably going to be an inscription there. It's in some sort of magical language, I'm sure. And then we'll just continue to dig down, and who knows? No, I'm just kidding. I might be mixing up the money pit. I don't know if you guys heard of that legend, but where these kids dug down, found boards, and they continued to dig and find more stuff. But yeah, no, it's a really awesome site. We have some footage, I think.
Yeah.
I wanted to show real quick because one thing I wanted to point out was, Steve, you mentioned that you know, someone might bulldoze the site. We have a really specific example of this. You know, as you can see, can you pause it real quick?
Is this playing? It's working.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yep.
Yeah. So as you can see right there, the heel has actually been scraped right there. The prior owner sold a chunk of the hill essentially to the state.
For fill dirt for a construction project. It didn't impact the cave at all, but
yeah, but that is something, you know, you've got a bunch of dirt on your property, you could potentially sell it. But
Miner Road, and this is the property here and the hill.
And if you look back in the background here, if you can
right
see
there,
Cumorah on the upper left.
Oh, there's Cumorah. Okay.
Yeah, that's it right there. And so over here, this hill to this side is where the sheep sacrifice happened. And one hill, or one, like, it's not a valley, but one block over is where the temple and the sacred grove are.
So
there's the house, and there's a shed, and then there's a trail right up
Mm-hmm.
here, and you go up here and you can see it. And the view from here is so pretty. You look out and see the fields. It's a really peaceful property. We were there in March.
Yeah, and it was snow on the ground, but
there was still snow on the ground when we went in March. It was lovely. So yeah, that's Cumorah. And then I think Mark wanted to
yeah, and let's zoom in on this is what the cave looks like today. As you can see, the real danger, just aside from someone bulldozing, I mean, really the danger is erosion itself, right? You can kind of see that it's you know, just kind of falling in on the sides here. I'm just going to put on repeat for a second, but it's really pretty. And you know, this cave, I mean, I was just kind of briefly going over the history today, and I was like, man, it's been lost like 4 or 5 times, right? And like rediscovered by different people. Different pieces or different doors have been set up on it and torn down, burned. Like one set was burned and another was thrown in the water. And
someone used to charge money, right? To be able to tour the Mormon Cave at one point in time.
Yeah, that was Comer, right? Andy Comer,
Yeah.
I think. So whether there's like the stories of Joseph there or not, there's like so many, like there is actual history there as well, right?
Yeah.
That's taken place over the last 200 years. So
I should know one thing based on what you just showed there, Mark. Actually, could you put it up on the screen again?
Yeah, sorry.
I think it looks like the cave is completely gone and caved in. So I did do a careful analysis of the photos as it was eroding. I am quite confident that the arch is still there and is intact. What happened was, you know, we kind of had a trail leading into it, and those kind of had vertical walls, and those kind of slid together and then piled up and plugged up and then kind of created the slide in front of it.
Yeah, if we could
But
just
you know,
figure that out, you'd still be able to get back.
when Greg and I approached it, this is kind of what it looked like. And then, you know, once you dig through the dirt in front of it, I mean, it looks like it caved in, but in some ways, this is actually protecting the arch. In some ways,
I agree. We went up on top of it, and you could still see that the cave. There's a slight indentation along the top, and you could tell that it goes quite far back into the hill beyond where it looks like on this video that it's caved in, but it's not. It's just the sides, kind of like you said. Yeah,
it's still in there. I mean, it's lost much of its original size. But you know, if somebody were to you know give this the care it needs, it would be nice to have this restored in some sort of way to create some braces or something, or a roof or a structure, and then maybe rebuild the cave back to kind of the tunnel format that it was in before. That's what I would love to see.
Yeah, reminded. I'm sorry, Erin. You gonna say something?
Oh, I just said, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah. You know, I also, you know, this is interesting with even like Mormon folklore. We talk about local folklore, but we also have Mormon folklore where we have the idea where there were wagon loads of records, this hall of records that was in Hill Cumorah, right? And the implication was, why did they use wagon loads? Well, the thought was that these records from the hall of records may have been moved to another hill, and that's actually what a lot of people advocate who believe that, one, there was a hall of records, and two, that it was actually moved out of Hill Cumorah to another hill. And one would wonder if this would be a potential landing spot for that other hall of records that some people have. And again, this is speculation, but it's just kind of interesting to think that might be a place they would have taken it to, because Joseph would have been familiar, and they could have maybe taken those records there, if that's indeed a true story, or maybe it's just folklore. It's just interesting to speculate.
And I think that's what David Whitmer believed. From his perspective, Joseph gave the plates back to Moroni, but Moroni then put them in Miners Hill Cave. And David Whitmer actually makes that distinction. And he's like, this isn't Cumorah, this is a cave nearby there. So, you know, that's all part of the cave lore. We did not find any gold plates. In fact, we actually had a guy with a metal detector there, and he's just like, when you go over gold, this thing makes a sound unlike anything else. But that did not happen.
Casey and the owner of the property have found things there as well. Like, I know Casey you found like parts of appeared to be part of a door. The prior owner talked about that he's seen square nails that had washed down the hill, and he even found some special looking rock or something that he wanted to give to you, I think, Casey. So yeah, like there's some interesting stuff there for sure. But
wow. Well, Erin, let's just kind of let you wrap this up with the importance of the research that you've done to what would it take to, you know, first of all, folks, let's have somebody buy this property who wants to preserve it. Okay, that's the most important thing. That's first and foremost. Let's get that done. But then this could also pave the way to the possibility of maybe making this a historic site.
Yes. So we were very lucky that we traveled to Palmyra in March. We were there looking to purchase a historic property that is not LDS affiliated in any way, but we just have a love for this area and the amount of history that's there. And Mark kind of wanted a launch pad or a crash pad for whenever he's in the area doing research. And we wanted to build our relationships with the locals so that, for instance, the owner of this property on Miners Hill knows the gentleman who owns the hill that has a sheep sacrifice, but it's hard to just be like, hey, can I come walk on your property? And so Mark, you know, he's trying to build those relationships. In that context, we were in Palmyra looking at property, and we had the honor to go visit this property. Casey helped us organize a meeting with the owner, and we toured what you could see. And it was so great. And that the landowner said he was very interested in having real archaeological work done on the preservation work done on the property. And so I was like, well, let me look into that. I'm an attorney. I do land use stuff. And so I was like, sure, let me see what that would take. And I talked to several universities and to the State Historic Preservation Office in New York about what it would take to designate this as a historic site. And based on the information I gave them and the link to Casey's website, they're like, yeah, the trail is here. You just need to apply. but if it's private property, you need the landowner's permission. And so I think the landowner was going through some personal family issues that we had to put it on the back burner. But the goal was to submit an application and get the state of New York to recognize this property as a historic site. And then if that happens, the archaeologist I spoke to said you would open up to archaeologists being interested in working on the site. Like there's like a level of legitimacy you need before they want to put their name, you know, with it and reputation, but we would be eligible for grants and for funding to make that a reality. So first thing that needs to happen is a willing landowner. And then, you know, I'm very happy to volunteer my time and labor. I already have spent a lot of time on what it would take to get that done. And then that would again open us up for grants that I would be happy to help apply for to try to get. I mean, how cool would that be? I mean, I was really geeking out with one of these archaeologists. Like, how cool would it be if we went in there and we found something that you could tie physically to Joseph Smith Jr.? I mean, it doesn't have to be anything remarkable or land breaking, you know, or change anyone's opinion about anything. Just like the human connection is so cool. It's so cool.
That is great. And I think it's wonderful what you two are doing is that you actually bought, I actually, last time I was there for MHA, I actually went to the Grand Imprint House shop and then just walked down a few doors down to your property that you just bought there, which is really cool. And we're hoping that it can become another hub of Mormon geek outs and cool things that we could do. And hopefully we could maybe even put on something there next year, which would be so awesome, like a public thing with, of course, the launch of your next volume of the Glass Looker, perhaps maybe a celebration of the preservation. Let's save the Miner Hill and the Mormon Cave. And let's, I think that's so important. I think, and also the fact that you are there, you're dedicated, you're part of the local community shows your commitment to something like this. So I want to commend both of you for doing this and putting your necks out there.
Thank you. We're really fortunate we're in a position to be able to do that, but also we just love it. And we hope that if you're watching this, you must like Mormon history.
Yeah, by now you would have shut it off.
But we hope the same. We hope that we create a space that anyone that loves Mormon history can just come geek out. And yeah.
That's great. I love it. I love it. Well, Dan, you know, when you stop and think about it, if you didn't do the work that you did a few decades ago, this conversation may not even be happening. Maybe that hill could have been lost to history once again. And instead of Casey searching for that hill, he actually knew where to go to dig because of the work that you do. How does it make you feel, Dan, to see your work, the impact that it's having even decades later?
Oh, it's a great feeling to know that the hard, digging up of archival materials and running things down I did in the late 1990s and early 2000s it pays off, and to see like Casey open that cave up, it was amazing to me, and that it was still there, and I knew it was somewhere in that hill, but where exactly, I just followed the path up the side of the hill that Comer probably constructed to get his little bobcat thing up there and to open it originally. So it's getting shorter, and it's caved in from the elements and rain and things, and but I feel very certain about the Lorenzo Saunders sources, maybe a little less certain about the later folklorish sounding sources, like by the Wallace Miner family. But Lorenzo Saunders seems a very solid source. They actually live there, and the property records show that Abner Cole owned the property. And so he knew what he was talking about when he's talking about Walters the magician and about it's Lorenzo Saunders is the one that mentioned Alvin and Willard Chase digging on the hill. Willard Chase, in his affidavit, 1833 affidavit to Hurlbut, doesn't mention his participation in money digging, because is a little bit of discredited. So that seems pretty solid. Alvin's involved with money digging, Joe Smith Jr. and Joe Smith Sr. These seem to be the three really active members of the family, although there are some later accounts that talk about Lucy getting dreams about treasure digging, and Sarah Rockwell, Orrin Porter Rockwell's mother, both of them talking together about dreams that they get about locations of treasures and things around the area. It is a kind of off the path, kind of historic, Mormon historic location, and it's fun to go to those kinds of places. Just like if you go to Harmony, Pennsylvania, to see the Smith family cabin reconstructed there, you can look up on the hill right in front of that house and see that Joe Smith, before he lived in that house and translated the Book of Mormon there, or dictated it, he was actually on that hill digging for treasure, guiding the treasure diggers where to dig. And that's how he met Emma in the first place, when he was brought to that hill by Josiah Stoll.
Wow,
So, and that's kind of fun to go and look at that place.
Yeah.
I think they should buy that property too, and do some investigation of where the holes were.
I think the church owns that right now.
The Spanish silver.
Oh, no. The
No, we looked that up.
oh, I forgot. Yeah, it's somebody owns that though.
I visited.
Spanish silver mine.
Yeah.
I walked around on that hill, and it was once didn't have so much foliage, but you could stand on the hill and look down and see Joe Smith's house from the hill.
Wow.
We tried to contact those property owners again. Why having local connections are so important, because
Yeah.
I think it's weird when strangers just knock on your door. Hi.
Or just
Yeah, but
So these are historical spots, just as legitimate as any of the other spots.
They are, which is why they deserve to be preserved. So if anyone watching this has any questions about New York real estate market, or what it's like to purchase real estate in New York, or about the grant process or historic preservation, reach out to Steve and he'll connect you with me.
Yep.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
We're gonna have links in the description. I'm gonna make sure that Casey gets all the links. Mark and Erin, if you have any links, we're gonna make sure that those be put into the description. I just want to thank everybody for doing this. Casey, I want to thank you for helping giving me the sounding the alarm here, and I'm privileged to use Mormon Book Reviews to be the platform to get this out to the broader historical community, to lay people who are really interested, to geeks who just love Mormon history. This is a really important thing. So Casey, thanks for the good work you do. And also, don't forget about your Book of Mormon Online project that you're doing as well. Make sure you send me a link that I could have in the description there too. So Casey, why don't you just say, we'll close it up there. You have any final words?
Yeah. Well, I would love to see this preserved and to go into hands of people that value it and preserve it. I care about the history, I care about the site, and I care about the folks that are selling the property. So, I would love to see them be able to hand this off to somebody that would take good care of it as well. Yeah.
Well, we're all just caretakers of history as well. That's the role we're doing. And the beautiful work that Dan Vogel did, I think it's great that the next generation, we can take that data, that information, the research, and then use it and apply it, and not just write papers, but actually get our hands dirty, do the digging, and do the work. And in many ways, this kind of work can be just as important as doing the work in the research lab too. This is so important that this kind of stuff, happens. And so I want to thank all of you and honor all of you for the tremendous work that you have all done in this endeavor. And I hope this leads to something even more cooler, and even some more stories and maybe new discoveries that could happen. And folks, just remember, if you're out there, we would love to find a buyer for this property. So make sure, Casey, he's going to send me the links for that as well. I'm going to probably release this episode a little earlier than I normally do on a Thursday. I usually do 6 p.m. Eastern time. Might just in the essence of the importance of the timing here, I might release this a little earlier as normal, just because I want to get the word out, folks. All right, folks, thank you so much for everything. You guys are all awesome human beings. Dan, thanks for doing this at the last moment. We really put this all together in the last 48 hours. Folks, we're going to have links in the description to everything. Also, for those of you who'd like to financially support my channel, there's links there as well. And just remember, the most important thing is this. Oh, and by the way, leave me your comments. What do you think about this? Do you think maybe the Lost Hall Records items are in that hill? Do you think that they could find other things? You just never know. If you're a skeptic, what do you think about all this? It's probably kind of a cool story. Either way, I love it. If you love Mormon history, you got to be stoked about this story. So either way, just remember this, folks. The most important thing is this. Remember, all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.